All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Everybody, what up, what up, what up? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to say that your adulation, even though it's recorded, means a lot to me. I am your grateful host. I'm all grateful. Happy to be here. I was a free man in Paris. Unfettered and alive. No one calling me up for favors. No one's future to decide. I could go back there tomorrow, but for the work I've taken on, stoking the Star Maker machinery. All right, everyone, let's get a hold of ourselves. I really don't know what's happened.
Why are you yelling?
I know, it's Joni Mitchell lyric. What can I say? It's
Albert, thank you.
Albert, thank you. Kim, thank
how are you?
Thank you all for being here. This is a daily offering. I don't know why we do it every day. I have to say, it is a strain, but I do enjoy our company, and mostly the company of everyone who joins us in our community that's found this show. So I hope you will be one of them. Subscribe and enjoy, baby. It is right on. What a day we have ahead of us. I will play for you the bizarre run or riff that Tucker Carlson laid out. Hello from Halifax, Nova Scotia, says Jay Abrams. I'm a big fan of Mark's show, but a bigger fan of figure skating.
That's awesome.
Maybe Jay Abrams and I could do a figure skating show. I don't know much about it. I would just kind of go, wow, that's cool. Wow, wow. It would just be me saying, wow. That would be a fun thing to do, you know, a podcast or offering all about something you don't know. Mr. Predicto, could Jay Abrams and I do a figure skating podcast? I'm asking you, Mr. Predicto, could we do a figure skate?
It is a strong possibility.
Wow,
nice.
Look at you, Jay Abrams from Halifax. I think you and I could have a future together. Wow. When this ends, let's stay in touch, if this ever ends. I hope it never ends. I want this never to end. I know what you're thinking. Trump becomes president.
Stop.
He arrests everybody.
Can't do it.
And, yeah, and this has to end. But
Are we in jail?
well, all I'll say is we'll erase all the stuff that hasn't been favorable to Trump, and you will be amazed at the nice things I say about the new Lord and Savior when he comes up. Yeah.
No.
You'll just know, gosh, Mark really did an about face. I today will tell you that we have a special guest, and for the rundown on the special guest, and to tell you who the special guest is, and to detail something that you can look forward to, and it's not just one special guest, we have two. One is a regular visitor on Thursdays, but the second is, I think, she puts the special in special guest, and now to tell you more about it is Kim McAllister. Go
Kim,
ahead.
how are you?
Yeah.
So this is a kind of a really cool coincidence. There's a Mark Thompson Show discussion Facebook page, and Wes, who organized the page, asked the question, who would you like to see Mark Thompson interview? And one of the entries, and I'm sorry I've forgotten who requested
Because I am an
interview.
award-winning interviewer, you might want to just mention that. Okay,
Oh,
go
amazing.
ahead.
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
One of the people said they would like you to interview PoliticsGirl. And the very same day, like it was kismet, I got an email from a publicist asking us to interview PoliticsGirl because she'd written this new book. So it just worked out so perfectly. So in the next few minutes here, we have for time's sake, we had to record it, but we have this amazing interview. You will not want to miss it. So good. Of Lee McGowan, who is also known as PoliticsGirl. And she and Mark talk about all things politics, about voting, about the history of the country. And it's so good. She's so fast and quick on her feet and flexible in her thinking. And it's really, really a good interview, followed by the amazing former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney, David Katz, and there's a lot to ask him about. I know you wanted to ask him about Judge Eileen Cannon possibly becoming the next Attorney General of the United States of America, as if she's qualified to do even what she's doing now.
Right.
Lord.
She's barely qualified to be a traffic court judge, and she's being talked about in the buzz around attorney generalship in the new Trump administration, should it happen. In that spirit, so thank you, a very thorough and I thought a fine job done by Kim to give us a sense of what's happening. And I will tell you that I don't know if I can get to it. I would love to get to it. I know, because I've read a bit of Frank Bruni before to you, Kim, and you really like Frank Bruni, and I do too. He writes for the New York Times. And he wrote just on that subject, which is the people who would likely inhabit a Trump administration, the appointees, the cabinet, attorney generalships, et cetera. He wrote a really good piece, and it's a bit long, but I will read you this. I hadn't planned to, but I will read that to you. Little excerpts to give you a sense of it. When first I want to get to Tucker Carlson, some other stuff, but I will, as the show goes on, in the next few minutes, I will read that to you. C. Jason Thwaite says, "Oh my, is that Mark Thompson? I heard he's kind of a big deal." I am.
Do you know who I am?
I am a big
kind
deal.
Of a big deal.
I am. A lot of people, I know it's not, shall we say, polite to mention that you're a big deal. You would like others to mention that you're a big deal, but I'm with others who don't mention that I'm a big deal. Kim doesn't mention it, and Albert doesn't mention it, and so I have to mention it. I don't want to mention it, but I do have to mention it, and so I do.
Doesn't it just stand for itself? Does it have to be mentioned?
Yes, it does have to be mentioned, Kim. It doesn't stand for itself.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, that's all right. Teacher Lori says, Mark T., I guess you did not read the comments, Mark, that you got that the lighter background of the SF hotel room was much more, in capital letters, flattering to you. You really should think about lightening your background. Well, you know what, Teacher Lori, first of all, I know that comes from a place of love, as do all of your comments. But maybe you should think about maybe not giving me all of these comments about how I have to change things, okay? Maybe you, Teacher Lori, should think about maybe just enjoying the show the way it is.
Good day, sir!
All right, I'm just saying, I don't need, you should change this, you should book them. Please. I'm having trouble just making it the way it is. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to PoliticsGirl, too. Really, really great. Now, I would like to mention that all right, should we get underway? Does anybody have anything else? Anybody else, like Teacher Lori, want to tell me how you should change something? Mark, you should really feature some new merch. By the way, we do have, it's just, I know it comes from a good place, but it's all I can do. It's all I can do. And the trolling begins, says San Jose Lola. By the way, we had a troll, I guess, who was very aggressive in the, Mark, you should be nicer to the commenters, says James Watson.
He's not
really
wrong.
Who is having that conversation?
I see. I'm not nicer. I'm not nice to the commenters. All right. I can see it's going to be one of those days. I was really excited about today, but now I'm feeling that. Why? Because I bit back at Teacher Lori. Is that where that come from?
Yeah, well.
Who was the other commenter that I was not nice to, Kim?
I think you've been nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Kim, how are you?
I really, all I was doing was, let me tell you something, James Watson, who says I should be nicer to all the commenters. Maybe. I've just had about enough of you, James Watson. How's that?
Yeah.
Day, sir!
Yeah. Yes, maybe you...
Can you let him finish, sir?
Yeah, let me finish. Maybe you, James Watson, should take a page from your own comment and comment on yourself that you should be nicer. Maybe open with a compliment.
I'd like to apologize and offer a giant my bad, we're sorry.
Oh, my God. I just don't understand it.
My words upset so many people.
I talked to teacher Lori, and all of a sudden I'm talking to James Watson. I mean, and he's talking about...
Would you like to apologize for what you've done?
Do you think there's any way, any?
I'd like to apologize if I've offended teacher Lori, who I do love, because she does. She's very much a part of the show. So
do you think there's
my bad? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Is there any scenario in which on election night?
I like that you say scenario. That's very. You don't say scenario. Is there any scenario? It's no, Mark. It's scenario. Is there any scenario?
You are something else today.
It's a faux sophistication. Is there any scenario in which you could see? I'm just.
Is there any scenario?
Yeah, thank you. I like that more. You're an American. Speak like an American. Damn it. Yeah.
For that Midwest accent.
Yeah.
Is there any scenario in which on election night you think we could do like a little mini show? And I'm thinking either in celebration, or if people are sad, a little, lift me up. Is there anything, maybe even like a 20-minute little pop on for?
Well, we might do that. I mean, here's the thing. We might do that on election night. Tom says, Mark, with the dark background, you look like a floating head. Oh my God. All right, I will. I'll
your
try
black
to.
Shirt does kind of fade into the
black
background.
Shirt. Yeah, it does. You're right.
You can just take the shirt off today.
I wonder if I can
take it all off, Mark.
It's not fake.
Why don't you do the show topless today?
Is that at all better? That's super bright now. Is everybody happy? Oh my God, jeez, it's just incredible.
I'm advocating.
Oh my God.
I know, thank you. That's right.
I think you should do this show topless.
I think it's like 3 oh my gods. It's not just
oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Exactly. Please give me shelter.
You're ignoring me. I hear you.
There's a reason that this place is fun.
The Mark Thompson Show. I don't know what's happening today, everyone. I want to apologize to the Asian community for what's happening.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
Kim, your coworker is so mean. It's coming across. I agree with Lori. Background too dark. Wow, it's really this is a palace coup is what's happening here. All right. Mark, take a sip of your Coachella espresso. It will be okay. Thank you. I will have a sip. I really do. I don't, where's my Coachella?
Now things are about to get better.
My Coachella Valley coffee. It's so good. Thank you very much. All right. I'm sorry if I've offended anybody and been too rough on anyone.
As Katie says, don't worry, Mark. It wouldn't be the same if you were nice. Yeah, it's true. I like a Mark Thompson with a little bit of spice to him.
Well, I'm just saying that
they pay me a lot of money for having attitude.
Exactly. If I showed up here and was just, wasn't a little agitated. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lynn, thank you. Mark is nice and crabby. All right. Here's what I wanted to know. Whimsy says, Elise, look at Elise. I love Elise. Elise Inzarillo. Whimsy with a $15. She's first into the super chats today, although I think Trevor might have been first with a super sticker, but Elise, thank you. We're crowd-funded, so we make a big deal out of the crowd that funds. I'm sorry for everybody who is really wanting to get to the action, and this is what we do, sort of sometimes off the beginning of the show. Trevor Starr in Hollywood, thank you. Big shout out to you for the $10 super sticker. It was supposed to be a super chat, not a super sticker, says Trevor Starr. I see. Well, I mean, again, we give the shout outs to the super stickers, the super chats we get on all the time, unless it's, something really abusive or whatever. And would Mark be sober enough to do a show on election night? Yeah, I'm not so to Kim's point, and then I will respond. Teacher Lori has a lovely response to me. On election night, I have to be on iHeartRadio at KFI in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. If we wanted to do something, we'd have to do it around 8 o'clock Pacific time. That's 11 in the East. We still might be able to do it, but
we'll see how the mood is.
Yeah, we would have to pull it together on the fly. So I would just say this to those who are watching. I leave open the possibility. It's a little bit of a reach, perhaps, but maybe on election night or once the election dust settles, we can do something. And so if you have the notification bell on, you'll know about it, and you can jump on with us. There you go. My Coachella Valley coffee is where it belongs, in my cup, says Harry Magnan. Harry Magnan, very strong supporter of the show. And finally, just to put a button on Teacher Lori, if you just joined us, we got into a little dust-up. I didn't think we did, but it's just that we had a basis, Mark, for comparison when you were remote from San Francisco, and several of us commented that the lighter background was more flattering. It's what makes you comfortable that's important. You do you. Yeah. Teacher Lori is finally around to where I am. Yeah. I like dark. I'm sorry. I'd like dark like my dark heart. That's why I like it. Yeah, I like things dark. Election prediction, Trump 52 million, Harris 71 million. Harris wins all but one swing state from and that is Wisconsin, says Brian. That would be extraordinary. I mean, there is...
What?
Now, if I can just get into some politics, because it's important.
The Mark Thompson Show.
There is there's a quality of examining the electorate that goes like this. There are many people who don't want to admit they're voting for Kamala Harris. They're in families that might be MAGA adjacent or full-on MAGA. A lot of women fall into that category. Women who've seen their reproductive freedoms yanked away from them by a radical activist Supreme Court. They know that even if they don't focus on all the specifics of Project 2025, that this is the essential agenda of another Trump administration. In other words, you've test-driven him once. You now know what you're going to get when you buy the car again. So the feeling is, and this is just to Brian Reich's point, or to his prediction, that if those women show up en masse in significant enough numbers, it would shift the electorate significantly in a way that's not being polled right now. The reason it's not being polled is for the reason I just mentioned, which is people don't want to admit that they're voting for Kamala Harris.
Which is so weird, because I would imagine it's more embarrassing to say you're a Trumper. I guess it depends on where you live, right?
Well, it's great that you say that, because there is also that way to look at the electorate, which is there are a lot of people that don't want to admit that they're voting for Donald Trump for all the crazy, for all the unhinged lunacy, and for all the autocratic instinct that is Donald Trump. But for whatever reason, they're attracted to his machismo. They're attracted to, his perceived strength, even though we know, it's all a show. For those reasons, they're going to vote for Donald Trump, but they don't want to say it. And so those people are underrepresented in polling. So you take a step back and you go, okay, is this polling then that we've seen puts everything in kind of this margin of error? Is it in any way dependable? Sounds as though there could be a significant number of people that fall into the I don't want to admit I'm voting for Harris, or I don't want to admit I'm voting for Trump categories, to the point that it's not a measurable thing. So now to Reich's point here, our commenter, it's possible that they show up in huge numbers, women or the Trumpies who don't want to admit they're Trumpies, closet Trumpies, and they make this election less than close. I do think Kamala Harris will win the popular vote by a lot. But that's just not relevant to the way we pick a president. Copper says a lot of women pressured to vote for Trump will fill out ballots at home under others' eyes, not in a private polling booth.
The idea that someone could control the way I vote is mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling, but that's not wrong. That's not wrong. I mean, Jesus. and there was just a huge piece today. It was front page of the New York Times. I know nobody gets the old school paper, but I might be able to find it for you. But the headline is GOP's drive for early vote gains traction. Here's what it looks like when in the old school paper that Grandpa reads.
Okay, boomer.
Do you say, yeah, I'm a boomer.
Yeah.
So GOP's drive for early vote gains traction. That's a stark turnabout, they note. So Republicans have traditionally voted on Election Day, right? That was a big thing in 2016, big thing in 2020. Well, they spent millions of dollars and months to push Donald Trump's loyal supporters to change their minds about voting early, right? So now they think in exit polling and in additional polling, there is evidence to suggest that it is working, that Trumpies, people who support MAGA land, are voting early. After polls opened on Tuesday in Wisconsin, some form of early voting has commenced in all 7 of the swing states. And as of Monday, they note 17 million people nationwide had already cast a vote. And there are initial indications that Republicans are showing up to the ballots, to the polls or returning absentee ballots, with more gusto than in recent years. In many cases, Republican officials and canvassers on the ground are spurring their voters on with the same debunked conspiracy theories about fraud that Trump has used to sow doubt about the integrity of the count. So essentially, they're saying the early voting is easy, convenient, and it gets you away from gambling on whether your vote is actually going to be counted if you vote on Election Day. They've really reversed the whole narrative. It's a remarkable turnabout from 4 years ago, they note, when Trump had thoroughly demonized every method of voting that didn't occur in person on Election Day. As states expanded access to mail and absentee voting at the height of the COVID pandemic, Trump repeatedly discouraged his voters from taking advantage. He said that mail-in ballots created chaos and confusion. Of course, he was saying without evidence that it would lead to, election interference by many foreign countries. He was just throwing everything up. So anyway, those people who used to wait till Election Day, many of them have now shown up early. And so this huge surge in early voting, which we normally ascribe to a big Democratic push in voters, cannot be ascribed to Democratic voters necessarily. But who are they voting for? I would argue Kamala. Or maybe they just won't vote on the day. The numbers have not increased, the Trick era says. Republican voters are proving that gaslighting works. It is true that there is a crush of lies that is associated with a lot of election, I would say, ads primarily, but also by the rhetoric that's being pursued by talking heads and the GOP punditry, the instrument really of propaganda that is the Fox News channel. And so you are just, in essence, challenged to find out the truth because you are overwhelmed with lies. So first, I wanted to give you some truth on the economy. I will get to PoliticsGirl here in a second. And then I will share, this is what we'll do. I want you to see this one thing on the economy. This is from an award-winning economist. And they polled a bunch of Nobel Prize-winning economists, and we'll just run that real quick. And then I want to show you the Tucker Carlson thing, which is just going to make your head explode. It's crazy that, if any Democrat had gotten away, or had said what Tucker Carlson said, they never would have gotten away with it. Tumbleweed with a super chat. You were going to talk about the troll yesterday. Thank you, Tumbleweed. I've lost my way, and I thought maybe somebody would bring me back to Magnetic North on this show. Anyway, we had a troll who was particularly aggressive and nasty.
Yeah.
And I actually went in and deleted him from the chat yesterday after hours. But just a warning that Kim is going to be watching the chat more. I don't really watch the chat so much. When I do, I only catch little bits and pieces. So try to keep it respectful. I really, I welcome people to disagree with me.
That is a damning non-answer.
Okay. Well, the point is I do my best to welcome those who disagree, but by the same token, the flame throwing, we just don't do it here. I bet Trump will claim victory on election night before California polls close, says Michael. Well, one strategy, by the way, is that the Trump propaganda associated with the polling, which is we're doing so well. Now, he always says that. We're doing so well. We've never done so well. They've never seen, that when he loses, he will point to the fact that his polling, and the polling was showing him so far ahead, how could he possibly lose, except for the fact that, what? It must not be a fair and free election. So he's going to claim election fraud because it doesn't in any way, that loss, conform to the propaganda associated with how well he's doing in polling. So he puts out the propaganda about how well he's doing in polling, and that way when he loses, he can say, well, you can see, it's not legitimate. Because look, we've been polling for months, and we were way ahead, and all of a sudden, where are all those votes? A record turnout was a win for Biden, and it's going to be an even bigger win this time for Kamala Harris, says Brad Forward. All right. Maybe you could get someone to speak about the red mirage and the blue shift. I am seeing articles about it, says Sally. Yeah, I remember I thought one of the best people on that last time that we had on the show was Jim Avila, the former ABC News correspondent. I don't know that he might be able to still comment on that. He's just not able to take an official position because of, he's a journalist. I'm running out of time, Albert. I'm going to now table the economics and the, don't you think, Kim? Otherwise, we won't get to PoliticsGirl in time.
Yeah, let's do it. Go, go, go.
So let's, so I'll tell you, Albert, why don't we run, just give me the Tucker Carlson thing. It was just crazy, and I don't understand how this didn't get more of a reaction, just because he's so unhinged. Now, before you see it, and then I'll shut up, the first 30 seconds, you feel as though you could almost get away with this style of propaganda, which is essentially things are out of control, daddy's coming home, and he's angry, okay? And he's going to make things right. That's going to really play to that crowd. But then, after 30 seconds, he takes it even beyond that to this bizarre, creepy, pervy, awful place. Roll it.
If you allow your 2-year-old to smear the contents of his diapers on the wall of your living room, and you do nothing about it, if you allow your 14-year-old to light a joint at the breakfast table, if you allow your hormone-addled 15-year-old daughter to slam the door of her bedroom and give you the finger, you're gonna get more of it. And those kids are gonna wind up in rehab. It's not good for you, and it's not good for them. No. There has to be a point at which dad comes home. Yeah, that's right. Dad comes home. And he's pissed. Dad is pissed. He's not vengeful. He loves his children. Disobedient as they may be, he loves them. Because they're his children, they live in his house. But he's very disappointed in their behavior. And he's gonna have to let them know. He's gonna have to get to your room right now and think about what you did. And when dad gets home, you know what he says? You've been a bad girl. You've been a bad little girl, and you're getting a vigorous spanking right now. And no, it's not gonna hurt me more than it hurts you. No, it's not. I'm not gonna lie. This is gonna hurt you a lot more than it hurts me. And you earned this. You're getting a vigorous spanking because you've been a bad girl. And it has to be this way. It has to be this way because it's true. And you're only going to get better when you take responsibility for what you did. That's not said in the spirit of hate. It's not said in the spirit of vengeance or bigotry. Far from it. It's said in the spirit of justice, which is the purest and best thing there is. And without it, things fall apart.
And so you saw how absolutely horrifying that got.
And so he then introduces Donald Trump. by saying, daddy's home. And the
Exactly.
crowd chants, daddy's home, daddy's home. And I'm thinking, is that what America wants? Is that what these people want? They want a daddy who's going to come spank the living crap out of you. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I can't imagine my relationship with her if I was spanking the hell out of her. That's either super pervy, advocating child abuse. I don't know what that is. I'm so grossed out by him.
I think you're right to be grossed out by him. And by the way, if you want your kid in rehab, and by the way, many things go into whether or not a child ends up in rehab. It's an almost unknowable, multifaceted problem, how people become addicted to any number of things. You're just, if not more likely, as likely to have that child end up in a bad place if you start with this corporal punishment thing at home. I mean, you start, beating your kid like that, that's an abusive, awful home life. Again, he is a despicable character, I think. Yeah. And the crowd was not completely with him there. You began to see, if you look around, people kind of going, in other words, they weren't. Now, there were enough people chanting, and they're all Trumpies there in the hall, that they, daddy's home, daddy's home. I guess, that won the day in terms of chanting. But I think he did lose a little of the crowd as he kind of began it. If there's time, we'll run it again toward the end of the show. Asborn from Norway writes us in the super chat. Dad should have thought Donald some empathy. Perhaps USA would not be in such peril. Yeah, if there was empathy. But old Fred was a terrible dad and thought just hate. Yeah, Fred Trump, Donald Trump's dad, clearly didn't raise a child who had any sense of right and wrong. His brother, actually, Donald Trump's brother, and he was the one who was really being, initially thought of to take over the Trump business. He was a better guy, from what I've read in various biographies that would suggest that. Thank you for the comment. We're a little bit late. Thank you for smashing the like button.
With your iron rod.
All the madness is over here. Now we're just to the political madness, and I'm looking forward to talking to Lee McGowan. PoliticsGirl brings it, and let's give you a healthy taste of PoliticsGirl and her new book. Give it a ride.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'm excited. You're going to love meeting this next person. You may know her. If you follow the world of politics, you know Lee McGowan. Yeah. Host, creator of the viral, award-winning digital media brand PoliticsGirl. Yeah, look at that. First launched on YouTube in 2015. Then you relaunched on TikTok, and now you're bigger than ever before, Lee. But if that weren't enough, and there are all sorts of, you're an industry, and you're an industry for good things. You're an industry for bringing together a lot of disparate opinions and allowing a real conversation around politics, around public policy. I mean, you're the real thing, Lee McGowan. And now you have a real thing, New York Times bestseller. Congratulations to you. A Return to Common Sense by Lee McGowan. Here she is. Hi, Lee.
Hi, how are you, Mark? How's it going?
I'm excited. I'm much, much better now that you're part of this conversation. Congratulations on all your success. As I say, it's all the good stuff, You really do shine a light on things that need to have lights shown on them. So, first of all, tell me about this book. So the book, A Return to Common Sense. What does it do? What motivated you to write it? The subtitle, and then I'll let you speak. I invite a lot of people on my show, Lee, and then I just speak for a long time and just watch them nod. That's kind of my norm. But I'm about done. But I wanted to make clear, because I think it's provocative, it's Return to Common Sense. Go put it back up there, Tony, if you would. How to Fix America Before We Really Blow It. This is the title of your book. So tell us, give us some touchstones for all of that. How do we fix America before we really blow it?
Well, first of all, I want people to know that I wrote the book because I have great faith in America. I really believe in the American experiment. I am, if people don't know, I'm actually an immigrant. So I chose this nation. This is my chosen nation. I was living in New York, going to school during 9/11, and the view from my apartment was the Twin Towers. And that day, like many other people, really changed my life. And it changed the course of my life and what I thought I would do with my life. And I decided I really had to be an American. And I cried when I became a citizen. My first vote was for Obama's presidential election. That was the first time I voted back in 2008. And I started the PoliticsGirl project as a response to kind of basically no one in my life caring about politics, which I'm sure most of your listeners have felt, like this idea that when you start talking about these things, their eyes would just glaze over. And I thought, ooh, boy, I can kind of see things going off the rails, but no one wants to talk about it and no one really cares. And I think sometimes when you've had something for such a long time, like we have with democracy, you sort of take it for granted. And I wanted to start a project in which people could understand the American experiment again, but in a way that we all talk, in a way that makes it accessible. So I started those rants in my kitchen that most people know me of. I'm just standing in my kitchen explaining things. And then I expanded it to the podcast because I was interested in diving deeper into things. And mostly I want people to go out into the world feeling smarter. And then it became the book because I really felt like we were taking a weird turn. And I wanted to address the nation that I thought was at a crossroads. And the last time we were at this really big crossroads, another man wrote a book called Common Sense, and it was Thomas Paine. And he wrote it right before we did the American Revolution. And I thought, you know what? He wrote this book for common people in common language about a nation that could go one of two ways. And he was very distinctly sure it should go one way. And I felt the same way. And I thought, who's writing the book today? And I thought, oh God, it's me.
Well,
and so I wrote the
what
book.
A great summary. And, you mentioned Thomas Paine. Tom Hartman was on with us was it 10 days ago, and he lauded you. I saw he said, like Thomas Paine before her, Lee is one of America's most effective communicators when it comes to the urgency of democracy and democratic reform. America needs this book, he said. If we reimagined our nation along the lines of Lee's 6 American principles, we'd build a nation we really could all be proud of. I mean, that's from Tom effing Hartman, okay? So let me ask you then, take us through just even a broad stroke on some of these American principles you speak of.
Sure. So, the book not only kind of gives you a basic civics knowledge, because I start the book with 20 pages of what I call America 101, because I think that, it's been a long time since a lot of people did high school civics, if they got it at all, or they weren't paying attention during Schoolhouse Rock, perhaps. And we've kind of forgotten how the whole system works. So we're often upset at things that are, when people say, well, why isn't the vice president fixed something in the last 3 years she was vice president? You're like, that's not the vice president's job. Like, most of us don't understand how it works. And then we get upset that we don't know how to fix it. And I often compare it to if you told me that the problem with my car was my carburetor, and I was like, that's great, Mark. What part is the carburetor? If I don't know, then how can I fix it, right? So if I say to you, the reason none of these things that we all want get passed through the Senate is because of the filibuster, and everyone goes, well, what the hell's that? Then we don't know how to fix it because we don't even know what it is. So I wanted to start with just basic civics knowledge. It's 20 pages. At the beginning, it says, if you know how our government works and you understand how the system goes and you get how our laws are made, skip this section. It's not for you. But if you could have a little refresher, read these 20 pages and then we'll all be on literally the same page. And then I set up what I call 6 American principles, which are 6 things that no matter where you sit on the political spectrum, I believe we can agree make America America. And it's everything from principle 1, America is a land of freedom, to principle 6, that government should be a force for good. And I go through all these 6 principles that basically start us on common ground for a conversation. So whether you're talking to a Republican or an independent or someone who doesn't vote or someone who thinks their vote doesn't matter, or of course a Democrat, you're going to say, yeah, I agree with these 6 things. So why are these our fundamentals? You say our fundamentals are this because of here in history. Here's where we went off track, and here's how we get back on track. Because I don't believe in laying out problems without also suggesting solutions. And I really think our country could fix so much and quite quickly if we understood how it all worked.
When you talk about us going off track, is there a moment or an event or an era during which you felt, looking back as you have, that we began to go off track, or have we always sort of flirted with going off track and then we kind of find the track again? Try to give me some sort of historical framework on that.
Yeah. Okay. So we talk about this a lot. I talk about this in the book in multiple different ways. I do think we flirt with going off track a lot. It's not just like today and it's immediately and we blame it on Trump. It's not that. We've had many times where the country has gone off track. Obviously, when we started the country, we were off track from the beginning because we decided to hold on to slavery, despite the fact that they knew that they probably shouldn't, but they needed to make concessions to get all the states united. We went off track during the Civil War. We went off track when we gave black men the vote, but not women. We went off track. And every time we've kind of moved along, we have progressed as a nation over the years, but slowly, not as quickly as we could have. But over time, our nation was written into the Constitution, was written the ability to evolve, right? Of the initial parts of the Constitution, one whole section is just devoted to amending the Constitution, to grow it, to expand over time. It's how we got the Bill of Rights. It's how we got women the vote. It's how we got black people the vote. It's how we expanded and changed and grew with the way the time went. So if you were asking me to pinpoint a time where I think we went wrong, it's when we stopped amending the Constitution, which would be in the 1970s. So we were progressing all along. We were getting workers' rights. We were getting women's rights. We were getting civil rights. We were moving up. We got to Roe v. Wade years, and we were like, okay, we're making all these progressive moves. And then we just stopped amending the Constitution. The last time we amended it was in the 1970s, and it was like for congressional pay period. And the one right before that, the 26th Amendment, was when we changed the voting age from 21 to 18. But that's the last time we made any real change to our Constitution. So what's happened is we kind of stagnated. And then I think what happened is we started to regress. So through the 80s, getting rid of a lot of the protections that we had that stopped us from having corporate monopolies and things that would take us back to the Gilded Age, all the New Deal stuff, people weren't so thrilled with workers' rights. They weren't so thrilled with women's rights. They weren't so thrilled with civil rights. And there have been people over time with long-term goals to roll those back, and we'd stop progressing as a nation that would stop them from doing it, which is what finds us where we are today.
Wow, such a great summary of where we are. And I think of, in relation to what you've just said, the way in which politicians can now promise a lot of things, pay lip service to a lot of things, because now there's just even an institutional knowledge that these things will never come to pass because you won't be able to get a congressional vote on it. The legislature has stopped working for the American people. And you're so right to point to that. And what does it take to get that ball rolling again?
Well, actually, it doesn't take as much as people would think. I mean, the fourth principle in my book is representatives should represent the people who elected them. And I don't necessarily just mean the party that elected them, but the people themselves, as opposed to lobby groups or billionaires or donors, this kind of thing. And one of the things I talk about in the book is about this stagnation, that we locked the size of the House just before the 1920 census. We said, okay, we're done. We're not going to have any more representatives, because up until then we would do the census and count how many people were in the nation. And then we would also expand how many districts each state had based on a population growth. And in the 1920s, just before the 1920 census, they were like, let's lock it. So we have had 435 members of Congress since before we had 100 million people in this country. And now we have 300 million people in this country and the same amount of representatives in the House, which is, of course, ludicrous, right? So we're not properly represented in this country. We're not in line with our peer nations. And it's very hard for those people to represent us. On top of that, we have things like I was saying before, the filibuster, right? So you have 80 some odd % of the country wanting common sense gun legislation or wanting to have a higher minimum wage. And then it gets to the Senate and they cannot pass it because you need 10 votes from the minority party in order to pass anything in this case, because you need to have 60 votes in the Senate. So depending on the numbers. But that makes it impossible, and it allows the minority party to hold up the majority party from getting anything done. And then it allows us, the American people, to say, see, no one in government gets anything done. No one gets anything accomplished. These guys are all useless. And that's not actually the case, which is honestly why I made the sixth principle, government should be a force for good. That there is a misnomer in this nation that when Reagan said this, the 9 scariest words in the English language are, I am from the government and I'm here to help. And I feel like he did the country such a disservice saying that, because here he was as the head of the government saying the government is useless and we will make your life worse. And I think if you're in government and that's what you feel, what are you doing there? You know, if you're going to be a public servant, if you're going to represent, in this case, in our country, 800,000 to 1 million people each, then you sure as heck better be there for the right reasons, right? We shouldn't have a single Marjorie Taylor Greene in those 535 seats in the House and Senate. Those are such important jobs. Those are jobs that make all of our federal laws, that pass all of our budgets, that pay for everything, that can declare war. We should be much more deliberate about who we put in those seats, and we should talk really seriously about expanding it so we can have more people representing us and a better representational government.
Wow. I mean, that's just terrific. Once again, like you just boil everything down so beautifully. It's offensive to me that we in California have the same number of voting senators that does North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, fill in the blank. I mean, it's not only a populous region, but it's an economic engine. We have many of the same interests working and concerns working that the rest of the country does, and yet we only have 2 voting senators. It's absurd. But then you point to the entire thing writ large. And then on the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing, I wanted to ask you, because it seems to me, and this is a frustrating aspect of, she's a perfect example of this, but there are also Lauren Boeberts, and you see the wannabes, the Carrie Lakes of the world coming up as well, where they're trying to burnish an image. You know, they're really more concerned with building their personal brand than building any kind of real legislation or transformative legislation. Even the stuff that they've launched, the Marjorie Taylor Greene launched legislation, is associated with jihad against the Democrats and owning the libs in some way. So I guess what I'm getting at the end of my little thing here is, sadly, I see the way in which through social media and in other ways, the noisiest kids in the class, but not the best kids in the class, are actually taking leadership roles. And I wonder if you could speak to that.
Well, I think here's the thing. We have a problem right now with our media landscape. I think there's a reason people are reaching out to shows like yours, to shows like mine, these sort of independent voices, because we know that the way the media landscape is now, it used to be in the 80s, that 50, 60 companies were the political landscape. Now it's 6 companies that own almost 90% of our media. And so we seek outside voices to tell us the actual truth because we're not getting facts the way we used to. But it also allows people who are using the currency of social media cred, of numbers, of hits, to get a lot of attention in this universe. And that's why people like Marjorie Taylor Greene succeed. And we have to I keep talking about having some sort of fairness doctrine for the new millennium, having some sort of legislation that doesn't allow people to lie to us for profit and power, that there is some sort of ramifications for lying to the public, especially from a position of power. You shouldn't be able to be, say, someone running for president of the United States, standing on TV saying FEMA's not on the ground in these hurricane locations where they are, or you're not going to get any money because the migrants have taken it, which is not true. You shouldn't be able to say Springfield, Ohio is overrun by immigrants eating your cats and dogs. There's no ramifications for lying anymore. There's no ramifications for spreading mistruths. You can buy a social media network and lie to us constantly and fill an echo chamber. And honestly, people should be able to trust their media networks. They should be able to trust their president. They should be able to trust that the news is the news. And we are not functioning anymore, living in 2 separate realities. So we need to use the government as a force for good and bring in some sort of legislation that would allow us either financially and or with broadcast licensing to stop people from lying to us for profit and power. Because I think most people can see that if we just allow people to travel in clicks and likes and, only hearing what you want to hear or living in your own environment where you're just in a constant feedback loop of what you want to hear, we can't function like this. We can see how we got here and we know we have to make some sort of change.
It's so true, too, that feedback loop includes the lies you're talking about. So you just have sort of this confirmation bias going on. So there's over and over people who are repeating the same thing that is not true. Just today I saw on this McDonald's thing, it's this ridiculous thing. It's a talking point for Trump, and he goes to McDonald's because Harris basically made a passing reference to the fact that she'd worked at McDonald's coming up. So what does he do? He turns into a whole thing about how she's lying, and he repeated the lie again today. He repeated the lie that she was lying. I mean, she did work, but as you suggested, there are no repercussions. That's a great word. You get away scot-free with this stuff.
Yeah.
And lastly, I would say, because there are no,
guardrails. Yeah.
There are no guardrails in the broadcast network, as we're going to say. They had minimal guardrails, but now we don't work in the broadcast network. It's all technology that's gone digital, and there really aren't any ramifications. Again, to use your word, I think it's an excellent one. You don't have to own anything that you say in any sort of real way.
No, and really the only feedback that they get is through civil lawsuits. You know, Fox News is a cable news network. They never had to apply for a broadcast license, so they didn't have to fit the same standards. They could lie over and over and over again about the election being stolen, convincing 1/3 of the country of something that was entirely not true. And the only ramifications they had was a civil lawsuit from Dominion, where they ended up paying almost $800 million for lying about it. But they didn't have to go on air and say, we are sorry, we lied about it. They didn't have their their broadcast license taken away. They don't have a warning sign on their channel saying this show, shows misinformation. We need to have some sort of, Snopes or, something that checks things or at least warns us, because people should be able to turn on their TV and trust the news. That is the #1 cable news in the nation. And all they do is lie, and their civil lawsuits prove it. But we have to do better than civil lawsuits.
Yeah, it's funny. Those suits that are associated with the defamatory speech, for example, in Great Britain, far tougher than we are here. But, we're really, the great thing about America is you can say what you want, and now it's become maybe, it's the horse is out of the barn. I don't know how you get that back.
Well, it's a little bit like we created cars, and then we were like, oh, shoot, we're braking too fast and people are flying through the windshield. We should probably put seatbelts in cars, and then we should probably make those mandatory. And people thought that too, but it was to keep us safe. Then we had drunk driving laws. We added all these regulations that people are like, why can't we do this for guns? But also, why can't we do this for media? I mean, ultimately, I wrote the book so people could start asking questions and thinking like, these are solutions we could actually make. These are things we could actually ask our government for. We could say, we'd actually like to not be lied to every day. We would like it not to be legal to lie to us constantly. I want people to feel like we can make real change out there, because we actually can. Like, if you look at someone like Kamala Harris winning, and if she gets a trifecta, including the Senate and the House, she flips the House and she keeps the Senate, then they could get a lot of things accomplished really quickly. Not only doing things like returning the rights of Roe to American women as a federal piece of protection, but also doing things like passing the For the People's Act, which already passed in the 117th Congress under Nancy Pelosi, but the Senate held it back because of the filibuster. But this is things that people would love in this country, making partisan gerrymandering illegal, so you can't just draw your district and like kick people out so you can never lose and be someone like Jim Jordan. Things like getting dark money out of politics, so somebody like Elon can't start his own PAC, personally fund it, and then just give hundreds of millions of dollars to one candidate. You shouldn't be able to buy an election in America, and that's what you can do right now. Getting rid of, making sure that it's more fair for people, having things that set up those guardrails again so that the American people can trust their election system, they can trust their media, and we can start making real change in this country, which is entirely possible. And I want people to feel that kind of positivity.
Wow. I mean, it does start with kind of getting into strategic positions of power, as you said. Yeah. So this election is so very important. I just think of your kitchen rants and the way in which you, through those kitchen rants, actually busted through the noise. I think it's very hard to get through the media noise, and you did. And you did it in this simple way. Like, you boiled stuff down, and the way in which Tony's got one up now, right. Just the way in which you surround yourself from an environment we all know it's kind of a physical environment we're all familiar with, and then you're just beautifully breaking stuff down. So congratulations on that. And now you've taken it to all these other levels. So I congratulate you on it. And I also think, I guess, and the reason I mention that all is that, you in your own life with your offering show how even within this system, which is lopsided with the old media meeting new media, meeting essentially falsehood media, you can punch through. And if that's true, then change can punch through also. So I'd love to see
And we don't even
it.
have to do it online. I want people to understand, like, you can do that at your own kitchen table. You can do that at your own dining room table when your brother or your uncle or your dad says something that's incorrect. You can have those conversations, and they don't need to be animosity filled. They can be curiosity filled. That's a great way to go into conversations with people. Every single person in this nation that is aware and kind of paying attention can absolutely change the course of this nation for the better if they just take responsibility for their people people. In this case, I would say like, hey, one of the reasons I wrote the book was so that people would feel smarter. I always say all of my work is not so you think I'm smart. It's so you feel smart. So you can go out into the world and be like, actually, I understand that issue and here's what I think it is. Or actually, that's not true and here's why. I wanted people to go out into the world and really feel like they understood what was going on, because you can't fix something if you don't know how it works. And I wanted them to know how it works. So all of my work did that. My book in itself is just written in a conversational way to understand the country, our problems, and how we get back to where we are trying to be the greatest country in the world. Instead of telling everyone we are, we should honestly be working on doing it.
Oh, bravo, bravo. All right, my last question to you is related to this moment in time where we do see a rise in autocratic instincts on the part of Donald Trump, in the case of this lead candidate, meaning he's leading his party. We see how there's a lust for power. In my opinion, there's a real theocratic agenda on the part of an activist Supreme Court and beyond, and Federalist Society populating the judicial nominations with those who are like-minded. So anyway, there's all this stuff going on. So my question to you, given the fact that the system is this electoral college system, which is horribly flawed, should the worst, in my view, happen and Donald Trump does ascend to the presidency, and then all of his acolytes and the associated political suck-ups, they all get in there, loyalists. Do you, Lee, do you lose hope, or do you, I don't think you're the kind of person who ever loses hope, so I get more to maybe the place where I'm, how much time do we have before it's time to go back to where we,
Yeah. No, listen, here's the thing. I do think that if that terrible case scenario did happen, we would be in true dire straits. I think we can imagine we would look a lot like Russia, a lot like Hungary. We would definitely be a theocratic nation. I think we need to be very clear that right now Donald Trump is no longer the candidate. He's not trying to win. He's just riling up his base, taking a lot of photos, doing this thing so that when they lose, because they are going to lose, they can say it was rigged. They can say it was fake. They are pulling people's votes. They are pulling people's, they are doing election vigilantism. They have taken people off the voter rolls. They are trying to make sure the Democrats can't win. They are not actually running to win themselves because they know that they don't have the votes to win. And I think you know that based on the fact that if you have everyone from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney voting for the same person, something's gone deeply wrong with the other party. He cannot fill a stadium anymore. And I think that the Heritage Foundation people and the Federalist Society people and all the people that are really, truly pulling the strings have ridden Donald Trump as far as they can. And they're just trying to get him across the finish line so they can 25th Amendment him, or he can accidentally fall out a window, or he can drink a tainted, Diet Coke, and they can put J.D. Vance in, who's a completely empty vessel for all of their most horrible ideas. But I think we have to be really honest that they are not going to win. What it's going to be is if they can get neither party to 270, I think Kamala's going to win 270, and then we're going to watch 2 months of just straight legal battles and fighting and probably violence as the Trump side tries to not allow the victory to happen. And I think that's what we really need to be prepared for. I think realistically, if he just won outright, the country would be in such dire straits. I don't think there's any way around that. I really do believe he would round up his political enemies. I really do believe he would send deputized people that he had said were above the law into every city in America to try and round up whoever he wanted to round up. I think they would put people in camps. I think they would throw people into unmarked vans. I think people like General Mark Milley is right when he says, I am in danger of being court-martialed and thrown in jail or killed by a next Trump presidency. I think these are all possibilities, but I do not think there is a possibility that they win this election. So I think what we need to do is prepare ourselves. We have to work for the next however many days to make sure that the people who don't want to turn this into an autocratic, Christian, theocratic nation don't win. And we need to be prepared for the mess that's going to come from November 5th to January 20th. And then we need to really stand behind the president and hopefully a Congress that will support her work as she tries to shore up the guardrails again, because they're gone. And we're in so much trouble without them. And Donald Trump would not surround himself, and J.D. Vance would not surround himself with anyone other than yes men in the second administration. And the guardrails that were there before, people like H.R. McMaster, people like General Mark Milley, they won't be there a second time around. So they cannot win, is really where we're at. We have to get out the vote. We have to talk to our people. We have to take responsibility. And we have to know that this is really incredibly serious. And that's why people, everyone from Russia to Elon Musk to Donald Trump himself, are pulling out every stop to try and grab this last vestige of power.
Wow, so well said. So well said. A return to common sense, how to fix America before we really blow it. Lee McGowan's book takes you through how to do it. And I like that you also have, you're a rallying point for those of us who need someplace to rally, because it can be pretty grim, you know what I mean? And I think there, in your message and all your messages, is a sense of empowerment. And so I use that word not very frequently on the show, but I really think you have that. So congratulations on everything, and please return. Congrats again on being a #1, the New York Times bestseller list and all that. A return to common sense. We'll have a link to the book underneath this video. And Lee McGowan, just love talking to you. Please come and visit again.
Thanks so much, Mark.
All right. See you, Lee. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Love that Lee McGowan, huh? Yeah, pretty terrific. By the way, there was a question as to whether or not Lee's book is on audio. Is it here? Is there an audio book? I like to listen to my car, says Osborne from Norway. The answer is yes, there is an audio book. So you can check it out that way if that's the way you prefer to take in your information. And this also, End Citizen United, legalize bribery, install an updated media fairness doctrine, and the Electoral College. Go PoliticsGirl, says Osborne.
Yep.
Women save the world. I agree. I'm over men. You know that. Sadly, there's some bad women out there, too. I'm astounded by it. Believe me, it whipped my head around when I learned that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene are out there. They're not exactly paragons of virtue and righteousness, but I do agree that I'd love to. I think old white men making decisions for women, we've way past the expiration date on that. But ending Citizens United, legalized bribery, which is what that is, and installing an updated media fairness doctrine, I think that's a great punch list. I love that. And I've seen it elsewhere in the chat as well, so thanks for those who have also mentioned those things. You know, the thing about the rise of cable and alternate media, now it's digital media, which is even going to crowd out cable, is that there are no real fairness doctrine type things that apply anymore because you're not on the public airwaves anymore. That's the way the FCC really ruled the balance that has to exist in broadcast media. So something does have to be adopted for alternative media, as you're aware. So other comments I saw along the way, whenever you mention the Electoral College, you get the blowback from people like Randy, which is like, you know, you guys use it as an excuse. What the Democrats need to do is figure out how to win the presidency within the current Electoral College structure and stop making excuses about it. It's not an excuse to point out that the system is fixed and rigged. It is, in my judgment, sort of absurd to play a game where the refs are all dirty and corrupt. It's a corrupt system, the Electoral College, and then say, well, you know, you just got to win within that corrupt system. You got to just win. Well, why don't we change the corrupt system? There's nothing wrong with still playing the game, which is what we're doing and which is what we have done, while still pointing out that the refs are corrupt. Randy, to his credit, and Randy is a smart guy, but he's he's got this Electoral College thing. That's one of his things, like, oh, stop complaining about it and just start winning with it. All right. Again, it's corrupt, okay? It's a corrupt system. The repercussions of Trump would be to him being defeated in November. That's how you provide repercussions to Trump. Again, he's like the parent who tells you, you know, just win even though it's a corrupt system, just go out there and win. It's okay. I had so many of those feelings of helplessness growing up as a kid, where you feel like, hey, this isn't fair. I'm ready to play, but can we just make it something close to fair? So when you say, just beat him in this, sorry, it's obviously we want to do that, but let's leave Trump aside. Wouldn't you want the people's voice fairly represented in a vote? Again, why is it always the rise of some despotic leader that we have to stave off in a system that is corrupt? Let's change the corrupt system. And those who have pointed to Citizens United and the way in which our politics is drenched with money, you're right. That has to change as well. I'm connected and occasionally go over and provide political commentary for TYT, the Young Turks Network, and they've worked really hard to try to do two things: to get rid of the Electoral College. You can get rid of it. Google it. There's an effort underway. And the second thing they do is they've worked hard to try to get money out of politics. Now, again, it can seem like it's too high a mountain to climb, but the reality is you have to start climbing it. Otherwise, you'll never get to the top. So that's where I am on that. On the repercussions thing, I thought she made such a good point. Donald the Maine Coon said, unfortunately, the Congress has now learned they can lie without repercussions and get reelected. It will never change now, he says. Again, never's a long time, but certainly right now, it doesn't look good. Please do an election show, says Pamela. I'm struggling about the whole thing, and it would be an oasis to listen with people who I have the utmost respect for. I will talk about it with Kim and Albert, etc. And if we did it, it would be at 8 o'clock Pacific time, so that would be, again, 11 o'clock in the East, and that's when they start declaring winners, as pointed out John. Yeah. All right, again, we'll talk about it. It's a rough ride for me because I'm coming from KFI Radio and iHeart Radio in Los Angeles, and I have to get back here, but I would do it. It's also, it might be, well, I'd like to do it. So if we can do it, we will. Please hit the notification bell, and that way you'll know if we come on the air. But I'll give you a warning. I'm just stopping because yeah, Mark, Hal Sparks will cover it live 24 hours. So great. There you go. Go over to Hal Sparks then. Thank you, 13. Put on David, says Gil. Yeah. Put on, I assume you mean David K. Johnston, or do you mean get to David Katz? He's not here yet. That's the reason I'm speaking right now.
Put on David.
Yeah,
where is
believe
he?
me. Believe me, the minute either one of those guys shows up, I shut up and open the door, okay? Example of how bans work. Big Money bought KGO 810 in San Francisco and shut them up to stop real information. Thank you, Charlie. I think the reason that KGO was shut down was about money. And it was a different problem, and that is that media, and this is, you can thank Bill Clinton, a Democrat, for this, media has been allowed to grow beyond the monopolistic limitations that they had before. They were already pretty dominant, but now one company, privately owned or publicly owned, can own so many television and radio stations that you essentially have a domination of both politics and sort of competition, finance, right? You can't find a place to work anymore because if you're fired one place or you decide to leave it, they own the place across the street, and they own the place down the street, and they own the place in the next street. So these media conglomerates are that. And so, to the point on KGO going away, this is a talk radio station in San Francisco where we really started. They were just a line item, KGO, to the big company. And so they thought, oh, well, we'll get rid of all the hosts, we'll get rid of the news people, we'll get rid of the producers, and we save a lot of money that way, and we'll just run syndicated programming. So it was a simple financial decision they made, and that's really what happened in that regard. When Katz is ready, I will go to him.
I think he's here.
Okay. Then Albert, without any, I have some things that are stacking up. We'll do them after David Katz if there's time. Angela Silva says, longtime listener from KGO, love the show and the level of information. Rock on. We need more Angela Silvas in the world. That's what we need. So rock on we will. Rock on we will.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This guy is known all around the English-speaking world for his legal analysis. You can find him on London radio, in the BBC world, in News Nation land. Fox News Channel has him on even. I've seen him on CBS and all the networks. And as I say, into Australia, New Zealand, and of course all over this country. And one of the reasons he is so much in demand is he takes complex legal issues and he makes them understandable. And he also isn't afraid to tell you and predict what the likely outcome might be of various legal issues. So with that lengthy preamble, let me introduce a guy who was a longtime federal prosecutor, now a defense attorney. He's the great David Katz, everyone. Hello, sir. How are you?
Great to be with you.
So, David, let me just quickly ask you first, there's this insanity about who might occupy a Trump administration that would be filled by loyalists largely, and he would pick up where he left off on the Supreme Court, et cetera. That is sort of presumed. And then I'll get to Musk and the legal issues there. But this story broke just the last couple of days about Eileen Cannon, the judge in Florida, increasingly being in the conversation for a possible attorney generalship under a Trump administration. Can you tell us or remind us who she is and how that might go down?
Yes, well, I think it's Eileen Mercedes Cannon. She was born in Colombia. It's interesting with all of Trump's talk about immigrants. She's an immigrant, but she's an immigrant that he really, really likes. So he found her when she was an assistant U.S. attorney down there in Florida. And then he put her on the bench, actually, after he'd been defeated. This was one of the last things that he did. And I always find it so frustrating that senators, I think, including Feinstein and some others, either voted for her because they said, oh, this will be great. Diversifying the bench, have a woman on the bench. You know, it's a lot more about ideology than identity in my book. Then a lot of senators didn't even bother to vote. So she got confirmed. You know, what's one more district judge around the country? Well, she was in Trump's backyard. And so when Trump was searched at Mar-a-Lago, because he'd taken all those documents he wasn't allowed to have, and then he'd stashed them and hidden them around Mar-a-Lago. And then he got all these inquiries. Finally, he got a subpoena. He had his attorney not tell the government truthfully, according to the evidence, and they showed this to a federal judge. And so they were allowed to get a search warrant. They were allowed to have his attorney testify before the grand jury. And the upshot of all of it is that when the FBI went in there with a duly issued search warrant, they found all these documents that it had been claimed were not even there. They found them hidden in the bathroom, in the ballroom, all of that. Then the case got run up the road by the Trump team to this Eileen Cannon, because this was all handled by a magistrate judge. It was all handled perfectly properly. And the magistrate judge, it would seem, would be the one who would rule on any further questions in the case. But the Trump team ran it up the road to this Judge Cannon, and she ruled in remarkable fashion in Trump's favor, not once, but twice on major issues, including that she thought there should be a special master who should go through all of the documents which had been seized. They couldn't be reviewed even by the government, although they had a proper search warrant. In the interim, there were national security matters in there. People were screaming, we need to know right away what national security matters Trump kept and were in there. No, we had to have a special master, this and that, blah, blah, blah. That case went to the appellate court, Mark, and she was reversed soundly as this being really an egregious decision. Then she made yet another egregious decision in the case. And when push came to shove and the case actually got filed, and a lot of people thought at that point they would avoid Southern Florida because it really didn't make any sense. The venue of this case was most appropriate in Washington, D.C. Trump had taken the documents out of the White House. You could have started your narrative right after he was president, so you wouldn't have the presidential immunity issue. Just start with the day after he was president. He took those documents that ought to be in D.C. out of D.C. or had his minions take them out of D.C. down there. But the special prosecutor decided to file it in the Southern District of Florida, which meant he had a 1 in 3 chance, the way that their wheel works, the way that their selection process works in the judiciary, a 1 in 3 chance of getting Cannon. And people were just stunned. And I guess the special prosecutor's view was that he could convict Trump in front of a jury anywhere because his evidence was so overwhelming that Trump had taken those documents, kept them. There was national security. They had labels right on them showing that they were national security documents. With all of that, he took his chance, and boom, the 1 in 3 chance did play out, whatever you want to call it. It went to Cannon, and Cannon has now taken as long as she possibly could with that case, but not really given them grounds to go to the Court of Appeals. All she does is not rule, go slow. Every now and then she rules on something which is so obvious it should have been ruled on in a month or two. She's taken 6 months, and they really she never gave them enough rope to take her to the appellate court a third time, which could have been a basis to remove her in that case. And Mark, the last thing is that then she finally threw the case out, but on a highly technical ground. And that highly technical ground was that supposedly the special prosecutor was not properly appointed under the law. It's a technicality. He apparently wasn't paid properly under the law, is another one of her canards. And all of this has been ruled on in the D.C. Circuit and arguably by the U.S. Supreme Court. But I say arguably by the U.S. Supreme Court because she takes the position that no, it's only been really decided and overwhelmingly for the government in the D.C. Circuit. Well, she's not in the D.C. Circuit. She's not bound by the D.C. Circuit. She's down there in Southern Florida. And so that's why when Trump goes around to these rallies, Mark, and he says, hey, this case was thrown out. Very bad case, very bad people, very bad case, all thrown out. It had nothing to do with the merits or whether he did it or not. And that ruling, this is another Katsadamas, that will be overruled. The special prosecutor is properly appointed. Think of all the cases where the special prosecutor has been appointed for the last years. They're all invalid because of the genius of her legal acumen? No. So it looks like she's nothing but, a patsy for Trump. And to get to your question then, will he appoint her to be attorney general if he wins? And the answer, another Katsadamas, is no. I mean, unless the Senate goes overwhelmingly Republican. There are some Republicans, if it's Democratic, they'll never confirm her. If there's a couple of Republicans that they need, maybe by now Collins and a few others have learned their lesson that you can't just appoint anybody that Trump takes out of a hat. They appointed Kavanaugh, and hopefully Senator Collins has learned from that experience. She's not going to look in Collins's eyes and decide that Cannon, and Collins will not decide that Cannon's a great choice after looking in her eyes. The other thing is that she's got to, at least if he doesn't have his attorney general, throw that case out, and he may get advice to not have his attorney general throw the case out. He may stick with that one, and if he sticks with that one, he wants Cannon, at least until Cannon's recused, disqualified by the higher court, if that were to happen. But until then, she's the judge on his case, and he couldn't be happier. So
that's a great point. Like, why if it ain't broke, don't fix it. She's taking care of him, and why move her? That's a really interesting take. It's not so much that he wouldn't like to have a loyalist as attorney general, but he can find another loyalist. Let's just keep her where she is because she's protecting him. Wow, that's so clever. Now to the legal exposure that Elon Musk may be having as a result of his swing state petition giveaway. It was $1 million he was giving to one person who signs this swing state petition. It was a giveaway, and he actually gave away this $1 million supposedly it was a kind of lottery style giveaway to registered voters, and he's supposed to do it in 7 battleground states. Okay, so he did one already that I saw, and now the Department of Justice is looking at this because this is, it would seem, David Katz, illegal, isn't it? Or is it right on the border of legality?
Well, I was joking that the Department of Justice could have put an end to it by making a consent decree with him that instead of $1 million, he would offer that boxy, ugly, new truck. And very few people would then be motivated to go do anything, to go do Musk's bidding then. I think this is illegal. The Department of Justice has pointed out it's illegal. Some of the magical thinking that non-lawyers have, and maybe some lawyers have this magical thinking too, is that you can do indirectly what you don't do directly. And no, that's why everything says you can't aid and abet, You can't attempt to commit a crime. All of that is illegal. So the magical thinking that he has is this. The law is clear that you can't pay people to go register other people to vote. But the idea of this is that the condition is that you must be a registered voter. So he wants you to sign a petition. This is the story that you're for the First and Second Amendment, and that from those people who sign the petition, somebody, a lucky signer, will win $1 million. But in order to sign that petition, guess what, Mark? You have to be a registered voter. So the reality is they run around to get people to register to vote so that they can then enter them as registered voters. I think Musk is actually paying some money to do that, which is very, very troubling. I think all the people who do that sort of thing should desist from it. Not that I think they're going to be charged criminally, but I think they should desist from that. And I think that Musk will get the message. And I think that I haven't followed it to the last minute, but I think that he will change the condition rules, or he'll stop doing that, because he's really risking criminal prosecution. There's a precedent. One of Trump's other buddies, this World Wrestling Federation guy, he did something like this, Mark, a few years ago. And the idea was if you wore a WWF logo or something into the polling place, and he'd pay you, that was the thing. If you wore it in there, then you would win this prize like that. And they warned him, and he said, this is so unconstitutional. This is so awful. But guess what? Then he stopped doing it. And I think Musk will, just for self-preservation, because he seems to have shown some terrible judgment. I mean, Tesla's not cool anymore. You know, Twitter, now X, is not cool anymore. How did he ever destroy? Think of those brands that he's on the way to destroying. Someone shows up now with that big boxy Tesla. You don't think, wow, that's so cool. This guy's really energy efficient. You think, yikes, why are they driving this Muskmobile around?
He's particularly reckless, and I think that's what comes with unfettered power. I believe that he has tremendous power already over government. I've said it before on this show that that's what he wants in a Trump presidency, is even more power. And he's already given tremendous power, and also huge tax breaks from our government. But he wants them to be even bigger. So the first three winners were in Pennsylvania, and they have 6 swing states apart from that: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, and Wisconsin, according to the website that he set up. And,
Mark, you have to be registered to vote in one of those swing states, and so therefore you see the motivation is to get people to go register in one of those 7 swing states.
He
and
says
that's what
our
you're not
goal
allowed
is
to do. That's what you're not allowed to do. He's trying to do it indirectly. What he knows he can't do directly, you can't do it indirectly either.
And it's interesting, just to that point, David, and then we'll move on. He says, I'm just looking for people to sign this petition. It's 2 sentences long. The First and Second Amendments guarantee freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. By signing below, I am pledging support for the First and Second Amendments. But as you have noted, but he wants registered voters only. So you have to register to vote to sign that petition, is your point.
Mark,
and that is where you run up against illegality.
Mark, I would strike out the Second Amendment part, because I think that case was wrongly decided 5-4 by the U.S. Supreme Court with Scalia and the others. But I would certainly sign with the excision that I would make and qualify for the $1 million. You'll be stunned to know no one has asked me, because I'm not in one of those 7 swing states. This is almost one of those things like Trump does in your face, where it's like, I'm going to act like I'm so disingenuous. I'm so stupid. I can't figure this out. And everyone else is saying the emperor has no clothes. Musk has no clothes on this one. This is a violation of the law. He got a letter from the Department of Justice. It's not because it's politicized. It's not weaponization of the DOJ. If you or I had done this, we would have gotten that letter. We would never have been so foolhardy as to have done that. And I think Musk will stop, because his lawyers are telling him, stop already.
As I say, they push it all the way to the line, because, unless the Justice Department does step to them, they can get away with it. In this case, the Justice Department did step up. We talk about the swing states, David, and you just were referencing them. The big thing that's happening in the swing states, as I see it, is the disenfranchisement of voters. These things that are done to repress the people's voice. I wonder if you could speak to that and the legality and methodology behind actually getting rid of voters on the voter rolls in swing states, for example.
Well, I tried to look into the 7 swing states and some of the current issues in the 7 swing states, kind of trying to predict if we're going to have another Bush v. Gore out of this election. And if we do, where it might be. Very hard to predict. One of the things is that despite all the propaganda from Trump and the election deniers, the elections not only were quite clean in 2020, even though we were in the middle of a pandemic and a lot of the systems had to change soon before the election just to accommodate that people were so scared to go out and so scared to go to the polling place where there was going to be a lot of people and a lot of germs in 2020. But in those 4 years since, while Trump has tried to play havoc where he can, like with the Georgia system, and we can talk about that a little bit in Pennsylvania, actually, the voting systems in those 7 states, I looked through just about all of them. I listened to what the secretaries of state had to say. They've actually been, they've been made, I won't say flawless, but they've tried to deal with some of the flaws. One of them in 2020 was there was suddenly this huge change. They've tried to deal with that, and they're expecting that many of the ballots will be mailed in. Now, a couple of the states haven't accommodated those efforts, Mark, because they have Republicans in the legislature. And so they insist in 2 or 3 of those states that they can't start counting the mail-in ballots until the day of the election, until election day. So what that means is they have to open up those envelopes that come in, the mail-in ballots, right? And they can't open them and count them until election day. So the reality is we will not know, Mark, on election day, unless it's a landslide, who won. And that's, of course, where the mischief comes in, because people are used to, especially older people, are used to seeing, by 11 o'clock, Walter Cronkite or Huntley Brinkley were on the air and they were telling you, or Associated Press, they were telling you who won, right? And that you don't have anymore, and you're not going to have it this year. In fact, the results may be later this year. They may be a day, 2, 3 days later before we know who won. It won't be on election night because they have to open those ballots up, and they can't start opening them in 2 or 3 of the states.
That's the key, that you can't, even though you've had this immense showing, it's like a tidal wave of early voting. Here it is. Brad says that's why the voting went into the morning last election. Can't count votes till day of, he says. So you just noted the strategy, which is somehow you make it close enough that it becomes a situation in which the dead heat becomes nobody gets to 270, and then things begin to default to what will ultimately be a vote in the House. That's the way it works. But on the legality of purging the voter rolls, David, the supervision, the legal supervision associated with shedding so many tens of thousands of voters in states from Georgia to Arizona, is there any supervision? Is there any objective legal supervision on these things?
Well, yes, and that's what I'm trying to say, is that in the swing states, they've really tightened up on that, and they're not allowing, the courts are not allowing these purges to go on. In Arizona, there was this big flap with supposedly 190,000 people were allowed to vote who didn't have picture ID. And the Republicans ran with that, and the Trumpsters, oh my God, you see, it must be 190 illegal aliens that Harris and Biden brought in just for that purpose so they could have them vote in a federal election and stop them at the border. Oh, that's all nonsense. These are people who had a driver's license before you had to provide a certain amount of identification. And so they were basically grandfathered in. And there's no reason to think that those people are not citizens. The court said, and I think the election commission down there said, there's no reason to think that those people are not citizens. And all those 190,000 people are going to be allowed to vote down there in Arizona. In Pennsylvania, there was just a decision today, because what happens is that some people just drop their ballot off and they don't put it in a little envelope. And in some states, including in Pennsylvania, that actually invalidates your vote. You have to basically, and people shouldn't get so worried out there. Not every state is like that, but you should try to really follow the instructions if you're sending in a mail-in ballot. And one of them is that you have to put it in an envelope in many states. In Pennsylvania, the Republicans tried to not count any of the votes that weren't in the little envelope. I don't know if they thought the people who weren't careful to put their ballot and envelope were more likely to vote Democratic? They probably had some survey, some psychologist that they paid to tell them that. Anyway,
it became a big deal. You're right. Yeah.
The Pennsylvania Supreme Court just ruled right now 4-3, the usual partisan splits on the courts that you see, unfortunately. But the Pennsylvania Supreme Court voted 4-3 that for any of those people, they're entitled to get a provisional ballot, and they're entitled to leave the provisional ballot. And if the only failure in the original ballot is that it wasn't in an envelope, they'll count the provisional ballot. The other thing is that the computers are so good. All that Dominion voting nonsense and the ghost of Hugo Chavez and how screwed up all of that is, that's all garbage. That's all lies. The computers are working just great. They're counting the vote just great. Hand counting is what injects the errors into it. The computers are counting it great. And so a lot of doubters, they say, oh, my goodness, how do you know that those people who send in a mail-in ballot don't go down to the polls and vote a second time? The computers catch all of that. I look back at the swing states. The secretaries of state are sure that they're going to catch that sort of thing. They think that there are all these illegals running around voting. That's one of the big issues in Wisconsin, claiming that these people who are illegally in the country are voting, or that people who are voting in local races, and some people who are not citizens are allowed to vote in local races, somehow they're going to be counted. Well, first of all, I think it's just California, Maryland, and the District of Columbia where people who are not citizens are allowed to vote on local races. So none of that is affecting the swing states. But Wisconsin, which is a swing state, is going through, and they're finding very, very few people in all of those states, as they've not found them in the past, Mark, who are voting when they're not citizens. Who would take the risk of being federally prosecuted and smoked out of their underground existence so they can cast one vote?
I've said it over and over and over again. It makes no sense. Not one. And by the way, not one person falls into that category. We had Greg Palast on the other day. He has a great new movie. It's a documentary called Vigilantes, Inc. It's narrated by Rosario Dawson, and Palast produced it with Leonardo DiCaprio. And there is not one illegal alien, or however you want to call it, illegal immigrant, whatever title you want to, or label you want to assign, that has voted illegally. And this is the fraud that has been so successfully perpetrated that you end up with these aggressive efforts to purge the rolls. That's why this is such a hot issue, David, you know?
Well, another lawsuit, Mark, has been about overseas voters. And this is hilarious. I think in the days of Ronald Reagan, maybe in the days of Nixon, certainly the first time, you would think that overseas voters were voting Republican. I mean, think of who overseas voters are. Now they know, because they live abroad, how much Trump has tarnished our name, how much he's, really denigrated the reputation of the United States in all of these countries. They apparently now vote overwhelmingly Democratic. So one of the Republican things is to not count the overseas votes, not even to count the overseas military votes. So they seem to have lost that in all 7 states. All of the states are counting the overseas and the military votes, but they have all these specious arguments why supposedly they shouldn't be counted, or those people never lived in the United States. I guess there are some people born on army base or something, and they've lost all of those.
Exactly, yeah. The arguments are insane. But, you know, this is something that you know a little something about, because since the beginning of voting here in this country, there have been efforts to disenfranchise blocks of voters. And this is just the latest incarnation. It's super high profile, but and it's multifaceted, as you've just kind of noted. There are all these different ways in which they're trying to get rid of and shed the voter rolls of these people. But it's not new.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have Raffensperger down there in Georgia. And Raffensperger, and I believe him, not just because he stood up to Trump and all the other things, but I think he's a real straight arrow. I think he's an example, like when Adam Schiff and I were public servants, of the kind of public servant you want to be. You have your own political party in life, but you try to do your job for the government as impartially and fairly as you can. He hits me as that kind of a fellow. And he said in this interview that I saw, he said that, we've got things so well organized that those lines that made Georgia infamous, the people standing, black people, for 6 hours to vote, and they passed these rules like you couldn't give them water. It was a misdemeanor to give a person water while they were waiting one of those 5 or 6 hour lines in black neighborhoods to vote. He says that really is not going to occur because they really have put their resources into making sure that doesn't happen. And again, because of the number of people voting by mail and how well organized that is. So hopefully we won't be seeing that in the swing states. And, so there's 7 of them. North Carolina has a lot of litigation, too, that I looked into. And it looks like North Carolina is being pretty well organized. So, I know the polling is very, very close in some of those states, but I think it's trending Harris's way. I mean, Trump has made such a fool of himself, worse than a fool, expressing to Kelly. And you say, in a credibility contest, this is the easiest jury question in the world. If you were prosecuting this case in court, you would say, on the one hand, you have the 4-star general, fought for his country, Kelly, the salt of the earth, the guy, yes, Your Honor, right?
Yeah, his son gave his life in Afghanistan.
Yeah. The serial liar on the other. Do I believe that Trump said, why do these suckers and losers fight for the United States? Why do they sacrifice anything to go into uniform? What's in it for them? That Adolf Hitler did a lot of good things? I absolutely trust Kelly. And I believe this is this is lie number 2,000 or 3,000 in a row or whatever it is by Trump. It's awful. How can people vote for that? How can a Republican or an independent or anybody, how can they vote for that? And there is this real fear, Mark. I know other people have said this on your show and they've said this on other shows. But he does not intend to hold another election. He absolutely does not intend to. He intends to be dictator for life, dictator from day one. If you don't believe me, don't believe any of us. It's out of his own mouth. It's just extraordinary, the things that he says. And then people say, show me he said it. And then you show them that he said it. And then they say, well, he must not have meant it.
Stockholm Syndrome is a strange animal, is why, says True Tech. Maybe there is some Stockholm, around this guy, and you tend to excuse all of these things. Kim, in a second, get to you, but it's remarkable to me that Trump can say these things and people look past them. The other thing I would just say quickly is when you talk about there not being another election, I just want to make the point that I think there'll be other elections if Trump wins. It'll be a soft despotism of the sort that you see in Hungary. Trump will never leave power. J.D. Vance will never leave power. He's the Trump in waiting. And the MAGA movement is so much bigger than Trump now. He is maybe the head of the spear, and the rallying point, but there will be other elections, just as there are in Russia. There are elections in all of these countries that are ruled by despotic autocrats.
Fake ones.
Exactly. They are fake elections. And they may even be close, because close elections sort of suggest, wow, it's legitimate. But the reality is that David's so right. I agree. The MAGA movement and the GOP will be in power for ad infinitum, really. Go ahead, Kim.
So I was having this debate in the household about the suspension of the Constitution and whether you could actually do that. Whether Trump has said that he would suspend the Constitution. And my husband thinks there's no way you could suspend the Constitution. So I want to ask my favorite lawyer if that's ever possible. And also, question number 2, a 2-pronged approach. We've heard in the chat today people talking about Trump possibly declaring himself the winner before the votes are even counted. Is it a tradition and just logical to wait till a real result comes in? Or is it illegal to scoop in and claim that you won before you really won?
Well, Trump, obviously likes to bully people and likes to assert these things that aren't true and then try to make his reality, like propagandists do by constant repetition. But him out of power is a whole different story. We managed to have a fair election in 2020 that ousted him even when he was an incumbent. And he's out of power now. So all the things that he threatens, a bloodbath, we have a tremendous police force and federal officers and everything. There's not going to be a bloodbath. That won't even start. People start to threaten that or do things like that. It's a totally different kettle of fish because he's out of power. The point I was trying to make about the election was just that there are a lot of ways that you can try to get around the guardrails. And there were a lot of people who kept the guardrails in place in 2020. And so, of course, people are worried that the guardrails will not be kept in place because he's got this 2025 plan that He says now he disavows, but of course it's the hundreds of people who worked for him who went and wrote this provision of this 2025 plan. And in it, there's a lot of things that would turn the government, greatly in his favor, trying to get rid of the civil service. I don't think you could do that. But the question is always, will people stand up to him? That pressure, when he used to send out 80 million, he used to tweet to 80 million people. It was hard to stand up to it. You look at what happened with the Department of Justice. They say, well, he really couldn't order those things because, he had, even Sessions as Barr, as much as I disagreed with so many things, they weren't just, yes, Mr. President, I'll indict that person, Mr. President. We do have a constitution that gets in the way, and we had protocol that got in the way. And so the threat is that he'll go around that protocol and try to give direct orders. If he tried to say, like, let's indict this person, he said that at his cabinet meeting, he tried to explain to him how complicated it is to indict somebody. It has to be an investigation. He says, well, if the attorney general won't indict him, can't I just charge him? Well, I mean, this unbelievably narcissistic, authoritarian, despotic view that he has, and he has it. I mean, I've seen enough of this now to say that he has it. Could he suspend the Constitution? Well, no. The answer is no. But he could do things like he was threatening to put that Insurrection Act into place. Some court, if he actually said, I'm now ordering, because there's an insurrection in this country, that the military do X, Y, and Z, that would be immediately challenged in the court. They might try to get that before Judge Cannon. It would be very rapidly appealed if some judge like Judge Cannon actually ruled in his favor. And I believe that the federal appellate courts, even if it went through the Fifth Circuit somehow, the U.S. Supreme Court would not stand for that. I have enough confidence in them that no, they would not, even this group of 9 would not allow the suspension of the Constitution. During the Civil War, and we were at a Civil War, Lincoln, who I admired so much, suspended the writ of habeas corpus. So at that point, if the military arrested you, you stood arrested. And there's a great story with Chief Justice Taney. They should take his statue out of the out of all the public buildings. He was just terrible. Dred Scott decision and all that. But Taney ruled against Lincoln. And there's a great scene where Taney's walking home expecting to be arrested in his walk between his Supreme Court office and his home. He's expecting to be arrested, and he's sort of trying to figure out how he would get out with the writ of habeas corpus having been suspended. He wasn't arrested. The North won the Civil War. Then he got killed, and Reconstruction got nixed.
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of, right, after the Civil War, there was a number of, that's a whole other fascinating legal history as well, and I only know it in a cursory way. You really know it. So, David, as we sit back here, we're kind of out of time. I sort of have I don't know if this is broken or not yet. I know that there's another, thank you, I'm seeing this, that, there is another accuser on Trump who was groping this model. Her name is Stacey Williams, and these are allegations that are detailed by her in a very kind of moving video, and I've also seen it reported in a few places. This is, again, when he was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein, and she was brought to him by Jeffrey Epstein. But I don't see any legal, has she brought legal charges, Kim? I didn't see any legal charges brought. I just saw her coming forward now. She's a native of rural Pennsylvania.
Not yet.
And she was a model, and she was a successful model. She was an international model, but she's young. I mean, she's a teenager, and she meets Trump, and he groped the crap out of her, and apparently it was traumatic. But these things exist in their own sort of legal universe, I guess, David, where even the E. Jean Carroll thing became money, didn't seem to dirty him up politically in any way. It's odd to me. I mean, that he has this laundry list. Even in 2016, he had this. All of these women, I think there were 75 of them who reported these different issues with Trump groping. And many of them, I think, did actually try to mount some kind of legal challenge to him. But in the end, the legality of it just gets sort of, it takes money, I guess, to sue him or to bring charges against him. There's a statute of limitations, I suppose, on the groping. Explain to me why these things, just from a general standpoint, don't really seem to land in any way on Trump.
Well, I think that's more of a political, issue. They have extended the statute of limitations for certain crimes, and whether the groping would be enough of a sexual crime that it's covered by some statute that extended the statute of limitations. She may yet have a valid civil claim because of one of those statutes of limitations. But one thing that struck me was when he made that remark about the golfer's penis. You could kind of tell where he was going in that public address. And they had a woman who was sitting behind him, obviously a Trump supporter, who was supposed to, applaud for everything and think it was wonderful. And when it was clear where he was going, the woman was sitting there with her young daughter. And the mother put her fingers in her daughter's ears right away and averted her daughter's glance. And then I guess she's going to go vote for Trump and tell her friends to go vote for Trump. So I'll never understand that phenomenon. But if I can just say one thing, if you don't mind, Mark, about a Katsadamus prediction. I predicted that our DA down here, George Gascon, would come out in support of the resentencing of the Menendez brothers. He's going to do that today, or he's doing it as we're speaking right now. And then I think the ball will be in Hochman's court to see, what Hochman's position is on all of that. I just do want to point out that's another remarkable election. And I know Gascon has been so dirtied up by the press and the Fox News and everything they've said about him. But I still find it remarkable that a Democratic, progressive prosecutor who tried to do something about mass incarceration and maybe gave a few too many people a break when he started out is in this much trouble and is about to lose to someone who I know and respect, Nathan Hochman, who is, he's not a Democrat. He's supported by the police unions with millions of dollars and the bail bond people and all those sort of people. So it looks like you said last week, probably inevitable that even if Hispanics come out, Democrats come out for Gascon, probably it's over in that race. And then I think it's going to be interesting to see what the police unions were paying millions of dollars for. Are we going to not have any prosecutions of police officers? Because we didn't have him under his predecessor, Gascon's. He came in, and are we going to have less of that? Are we going to have bail bonds again, Mark? It used to be if somebody got charged with domestic violence, it could be a small incident, middle-class person, kind of person that I represented, kind of person Nathan Hochman represented. Right off the bat, they'd have a $50,000 bail. You knew very well they weren't going to run away. They weren't going to do anything. They were going to go right home, right? But they had to pay this $50,000 bail bond. That's $5,000 in the pocket of the bail bonds people. There's this whole bail bonds industry. In the federal system, Bobby Kennedy got rid of it. We managed to run the federal courts since Bobby Kennedy without bail bonds, with bail officers who don't charge a bond. They figure out whether the person's going to come back or not, and they figure out some conditions like electronic monitoring so the person comes back. And of course, the last thing is that Nathan Hochman says that Gascon doesn't know how to try a case. And he does, although I was a DA for a while in Brooklyn. But Hochman's never been a DA, but he has to go try a case. He has to go try one of those high-profile cases, right? Because he dissed Gascon, that Gascon doesn't know how to try one, and Hochman sure does. So he better go try one. And he also needs to treat Gascon's people when he takes over fairly, because he's made a big issue that Gascon didn't treat the other prosecutors fairly when he came in. So Hochman, of course, has a duty, and I think he'll live up to it, to treat everyone fairly in that office, whether they were for him or against him, or whether they were supposedly a Gascon person or not.
This speaks to the political shift in America and in major cities. The fact that progressive prosecutors are just being edged out, and voted out. We saw it in San Francisco with Chesa Boudin, and now you're seeing it. It's not even close in Los Angeles. I think there's a 30-point lead that Hochman has.
Here's what else is interesting. Soros won't give money anymore. Now, Soros gave money. He was idealistic. He had nothing to gain by this. He idealistically believed that, juveniles should be treated as juveniles if possible and not given adult criminal records, that there was a way to do restorative justice, that police officers who broke the law should be punished, just like non-police officers who break the law are prosecuted and punished. And he believed in those kinds of changes out of, I think, just pure altruism. And he got savaged in the press. They said everything. They said things about him that were horrible. I think they were made up. And he had this constant drumbeat of invective against him. Who needs it? Who needs it? I think that was all it was, And so he didn't want to put the money in this time either to save Boudin, and he hasn't put in a dime to help. So you have this. It's so anomalous. It really is. Here's somebody who's spending 10 times as much as Gascon, and it's like something you read from one of the red states. A guy who's not a Democrat is beating a Democrat. A guy who's not a progressive is beating a progressive. A guy who's got 10 times as much money from the police unions is beating a progressive prosecutor. And it's all happening. And as you say, with a 20 or 30% margin. So I just hope it all works out.
Isn't that great? That should be the tagline on everything that we ever talk about. I love our time together. Alas, it's over. David, appreciate you. We'll watch for you on News Nation and across, I say, the English-speaking world with all of your legal analysis.
Oh, my God. Cuomo has Vance today. I don't know if you should watch Katz. Don't watch Vance. I'm their best guest.
I don't know. I don't know. JD Vance is like he makes despotism sort of warm and cuddly. Isn't that sort of his basic vibe? I mean, I don't get it. So thanks, David. David Katz, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Great to be with you, Kim. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, good stuff, Kim. Yeah, thank you.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, got a lot of stuff for David. Thanks, David, says Trick. And the altruism is wonderful. 30% America seems to have only disdain for this word. It's so sad. Yeah, in this case, it's altruism. I don't know. Let me just say, there's a lot about America, and there are a lot of Americans. Many of them are here in our chat and are part of our community that are pretty terrific, and altruism is very much a word that I think can be applied to many Americans, again, who are here on this show and way beyond. I mean, so don't, and you know me, when I say this stuff, it's really something, because I have a very pessimistic, I would say, realistic view of humanity. I think humanity is basically fecal matter floating in the evolutionary pool, and that we are the only species that actually destroys our own habitat. There is no other species on Earth that will destroy its own habitat. Evolutionarily, we are built to protect our own habitat. Every other species on Earth does it, but not human beings. Human beings are destroying not only other habitats, but our own. And so I think very little of humanity that way. That said, there are magnificent human beings who exist in all of that. And I think a lot of them are in our community. A lot of them come to this show. And a lot of them have never heard of this show, and they just exist in other places. So I wouldn't paint with too broad a brush when it comes to America. There is a lot great about America and a lot of great Americans. Sadly, the noisiest Americans, it seems, are some of the most toxic. And that's where you run into altruism not really being a part of their DNA. And what David was talking about was something else. He was talking about George Soros, and he was talking about that money being applied in various political races for altruistic reasons, meaning it doesn't help George Soros if there is a victory in a specific political race. Soros believed in certain precepts, certain aspects and certain freedoms that would be aspects of the law that would be upheld if certain candidates and certain outcomes actually came to pass. But he didn't really benefit from any of that. He only was doing it for altruistic reasons. That's what David was saying there. So that altruism is, is different. It's sort of factored into the political framework that is really frustrating at times. Where are we time-wise here? Albert, what's our situation, please? I've had to bump a lot of stuff today, I know.
Albert, thank you.
What do we have, and what can I do, and where are we, and how bad is it? Don't sugarcoat it. Give it to me straight. Give it to me straight, Albert.
Well, we were teasing this Economist video.
Girl, you just
we should probably get to that one.
Yeah. Let's, we probably can what?
We should probably get to that one because we teased it a couple times.
Let's do it. There are Nobel Prize-winning economists and a bunch of award-winning economists who got together, and they talked about the differing outcomes with the two candidates and their economic plans. I would put economic plans in quotes with Trump, since he really just can't find his butt with both hands when it comes to the economy. But having said that, roll it, and here's the analysis.
The prize announcement by the Economists, and it's indicative of what economists feel about it. So let me show you one other survey of economists, and then we'll get into the details of why economists feel as strongly as they do. So the Wall Street Journal surveyed 39 economists, and what they found was this: a lot of support for many of Harris's key plans, 74 support for her tax credit of $6,000 for new babies, 59 support for raising the corporate tax cut, 64% for capping insulin prices at $35 for everyone, and 46%, roughly 50-50, for capping out-of-pocket spending on prescription drugs. Less support for a couple of other things, but basically very strong support. Contrast that over here with Donald Trump, who got 8% support from economists for making his tax cuts permanent, exactly 0 support for his tariffs of 20%, and 5% support for eliminating taxes on Social Security benefits, and I'm going to come back to that in a second. So the dramatic contrast between support for Harris on the one side, no support basically for Trump on the other side, from 39 economists from across the board.
So, Steve, you can already hear Trump's campaign, Trump supporters saying, oh, these are pointy-headed economists, these are academics, who cares? We can point them, though, to the economists from the Wall Street Journal or Goldman Sachs, who says that Kamala Harris's economy would be better than Donald Trump. So let's move to your second chart about what a Trump plan would actually do to the economy if implemented the way he's pitching it.
Yeah, so why are these economists so opposed to Trump's plan? Because the economic effects would be pretty terrible. This is a study done by Bloomberg Economics, and they found that Harris's plan did not have much change in either the GDP or inflation, which in a sense is a good thing at this point. But look at what Trump's plan would do. Trump's plan would cut the GDP by 8.9%. And let me put that in perspective for you. This is roughly twice the amount that the GDP went down during the financial crisis. Wow. So we would be looking at something between a recession and a depression. And interestingly, as I'm sure people know because we've talked about this many times, the tariffs would cause certainly a part of this. But the biggest cause, actually, of this drop are the mass deportations that Trump is talking about, because he would take huge pieces of our labor force out of the country, send them back or send them somewhere else. And the result would be business wouldn't have labor. They wouldn't be able to produce things, and you'd have this enormous economic contraction. So this is something we've never seen before in terms of scoring a set of policy proposals from a presidential candidate. The other reason why Harris seems to be doing better, or maybe doing better for her economic thoughts relative to Trump, is maybe people are figuring out what's actually in these two plans. And one of the most important things in these two plans are the differences in their tax proposals. Harris's tax proposal would raise incomes for people at the bottom 20%, for people in the 20 to 40% percentile by fairly significant amounts. She would raise taxes for people at the higher incomes down here, in the 99 to 100 and the 95 to 99. Trump does the opposite. He raises after-tax incomes for people at the highest incomes up here. And believe it or not, if you're at the bottom, Trump's tax plan would actually increase your taxes slightly. So maybe people are figuring out these kinds of differences and changing their view of her economic plan versus Trump's economic plan.
Well, Steve, that's a good. Thank you. That, I think, just states it starkly. I mean, essentially, if it ain't broke, don't fix it applies to this as well, which is things are humming along, even though there are prices on some staples, eggs, et cetera, that are too high. Grocery prices are particularly high. I'd suggest that home prices are also high. What you have now is you have a floating of the interest rate down a bit, and that's making hopefully that latter category a little more approachable. You know, you'll pay less for a loan, and as a result, maybe be able to get into a house or some kind of a home ownership in a way that you couldn't when housing interest rates were so high on home loans. The reality is that I was just talking to somebody at Morgan Stanley yesterday, just a friend of mine who happens to work at Morgan Stanley, and he was saying that the Trump leadership will just turn the economy on its side because there's a chaos associated with it, and investors like stability, of course. So you've, in addition to all of these very nuanced areas of the economy that will be affected by a lack of nuance and sort of this ham-fisted approach that Donald Trump has, you'll also just have the chaos that Donald Trump welcomes, a trade war with China to begin with, and trade war with other trading partners. You don't want a trade war with China. You really don't. I mean, we're their best customer. They're our best provider. And while you can work around the edges, and I'm not suggesting you just completely open the doors, you make trade agreements with many of these powerful countries who you do business with. And that's a very subtle, as I say, nuanced thing to deal with. So again, none of those things present in a Trump administration. So I thought that that poll from the Wall Street Journal detailing why they feel a Trump presidency would be disastrous for the economy. I mean, essentially, you saw the headline. It craters the economy, destroys the economy, and it happens quickly. It goes recession/depression. I mean, the idea somehow that Donald Trump could be associated with some confidence that people have in his ability to run the economy. Nothing he's done regarding money has been successful. Nothing. The only thing he's successfully done.
I mean,
and
he has a lot of it.
He did it. Well, he has a lot less of it actually than he started with. In multiple bankruptcies, and he's traded on his name. This is what I was about to say. This one successful thing he's done is he's made his brand, the Trump brand, of value. So a lot of these buildings that he has, they have just his name. He doesn't actually own the real estate there. And similarly, being president is a great way to make money. As you know, many of his hotels and resorts had tons of foreign money pouring into them because those were entities that were doing business with the White House. And that will continue. Tomorrow, I'll answer an email, I don't have time for it now, regarding whether Trump would make more money in the White House or out of the White House, and doesn't he actually maybe want to not win because that he could make more money on the outside? The short answer to that is no. He wants to win, and the legal threat is the real reason he wants to win. But when it comes to
fighting for his freedom and his life,
but if you take that out, is my point, the amount of money that he can make, and essentially now that he's completely protected by the Supreme Court and in an immunity in the executive branch, he can make sick money by being president. And he'll do it in many ways that are not that complicated to actually see. Well, we'll address it if we can tomorrow. I did get an email that I thought was interesting, and I will, I don't know, Albert.
I've received a lot of positive letters.
I don't know. I'll address this quickly. The email is from Buck. Do you remember Buck?
I do.
Yeah. Buck, on our KGO show, he would text the show. He would call the show, I think. Mostly text, I believe. Hey, Mark, a quick recommendation, he says. I think you guys spend too much time answering and addressing your group chat comments.
What?
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Personally, I think it just takes valuable time away from the show, and I find it annoying. I think it will hinder getting new subscribers. Just a thought. By the way, still love the show. Buck. So here is what I'd like to do. Already, this is the kind of reaction we get. Screw Buck, man. What I'd like to do, this is how you get hate. Welcome to my world, Buck. Jennifer says, I find Buck annoying.
Well, isn't that the point?
It was great. I loved it.
I mean, it's about being interactive. You know, it's about being able to talk to people and get their ideas on things and share and exchange information.
Maybe. NorCal Mundo says, I 100% agree with Buck. All right. Well, here is what I would say. What Kim is saying is correct. It is part of this new platform that we're able to interact. It's just what we used to do with text messages and the like on KGO radio. But I'm going to say this in fairness to Buck and those of you who might be annoyed. I think sometimes comments can crash into a conversation and divert us. And what I'd like to do is try to, and people are saying bye-bye buck. All right. What I'd like to do is actually suggest that we have, and this is something that Albert, you could help us with, places in the show where we read the comments. And I had originally intended to do this with emails, but we love Buck, but no super chats. But no, he says, we love Buck. This is the word from Norway, Osborne. We love Buck, but no, super chats are income. Yeah, so we could continue to read super chats and give them priority. I also think that we could set aside time in the show to deal with comments. And so I may try to develop that. In every hour, there are 2 hours on this show that we do. We should set aside time to address comments. And we do it a little bit at the end of the show. We've kind of begun to do that, where we take comments that are running during the show and we kind of put them to the side and we'll get to them. So I actually think Buck's onto something that we can probably handle and handle it in a way that it addresses both issues, right? So it doesn't divert the show, but by the same token, it doesn't ignore the comments. So we'd kind of talked about that for a while, and I think we're going to try to do more of it. It may be a process, it may not just be a sudden thing, but thank you. And if you have a suggestion, keep it to yourself. But if you must share it, you can send us an email, themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. OMG, I'm a fundy. Harry Magnan with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Harry. Edward Lee, Tim is on 4 to 9 on election night. You must stay on. Tim is Tim Conway Jr. on KFI. That's where I'll be. But I have told them already that I will likely leave at 7. Those of you who are Southern California, LA listeners on KFI, and that would allow me to get over here so we could power up at 8. So that's kind of the way I'm thinking of it now. Again, this is on election night. The uprights say, thank you for your positive representation of the floating head community. Thank you. For those who are just joining us, I'm wearing a black shirt. This is a black background, and people are commenting and not happy that it looks like my head is floating, and it just is a bad look, people feel. And there's a big push because I don't have enough to worry about. Thank you. I just can't believe it. Lee, I'm an enormous fan, says Murphy Rowan. This is for Lee McGowan, who was with us in the first hour. And it's so wonderful to see you here on Mark's show. Thank you for your dedication and tenacity. Tenacity, a ding word. It is really cool to have Lee on the show. I hope Lee will be back. I also saw Spencer Griffin says in a super chat, Dumpy cries foul about not knowing who the winner is on election night, yet whose fault is that? Accusations are always confessions with him. Yeah, well, he's setting the stage, we know, for gumming up the works and for taking it to another level. And again from Osborne, again from Norway, SEAL Team 6 will decide the elections.
Oh, God, I hope not.
That's scary. Joe Biden will save the election if Kamala wins. Vote blue. The one thing I will say, thanks, Osborne, the one thing I would say about that is I would say that it was a significant comment. I already commented on this. Thanks for that, Osborne. The significant comment that David Katz was making, and I've made this comment before as well, but I mean, of course, David makes it probably even in a better way than I do, is that with Joe Biden as the incumbent, it's a much different situation than it was in 2020, okay? In 2020, you had Trump in office trying to retain power while engineering a coup. In 2024, you have Joe Biden in the incumbency. And so any coup that's engineered can be shut down quite quickly. You can't have a midnight meeting, fire a bunch of people, hire another attorney general for a corrupt Justice Department, try to collect your generals, get the military on your side. You can't do any of those things. If you're Donald Trump, all of those plans are evaporating, all right? So that's the one thing you should hang some hope on, is I just don't think you'll see that level of mischief, to use a tame word, that you saw in 2020. Current situation, lost boy in front of our house, giving water, calling police, says Wes. Wow.
Oh, no.
That's sad.
Yeah.
I hope that works out. Thank you.
Yeah.
But anyway, so from the national concern to the local concern, that's the way I see it. So
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'm super late, actually, right now. Tomorrow, we are live on the road from a swing state. That's right. From what is now considered a swing state. I will be in Nevada tomorrow. We'll host the show from there. Yeah.
What are you doing in Nevada? Gambling?
Well, there'll be some. I'm meeting really friends is what I'm doing, but I'm sure there will be some gambling in the mix. Friday and Monday we'll be there from Nevada. So, also tomorrow, the great Anthony Davis joins us. Yeah. From the Midas Network. I also saw a comment about. Let me just see if I can find it. I saw a good comment about getting Dr. Richard Wolff on, and I want to get Dr. Richard Wolff on, and I will get Dr. Richard Wolff on about economics.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
I'm just happy that I have Kim on.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Albert. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, everybody. Until tomorrow. Bye-bye.